All right, the last one we need to talk about is distance. Distance formula is actually just a fancy formula that's really, or a fancy version of the Pythagorean theorem. So I want to show you an example. This graph down here I drew at the bottom it doesn't relate to 6 or 7, but it's going to help us understand how distance formula works. So when we're talking about distance, we're trying to figure out what the distance between these 2 points are. So this distance right here. Well, the way you do that is you find your horizontal distance right here, and then you also find your vertical distance between the 2 points. So you're making a little right triangle. Well, if you remember Pythagorean theorem, according to Pythagorean theorem, you do a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So our c in this case is the hypotenuse, or is always the hypotenuse, which is the distance we're looking for. And then our a is this horizontal distance, and our b is this a vertical distance. You can reverse the a and b, but those two are supposed to represent the legs. Well, if you look at this, the distance, this is the coordinate, this point right here is 1, 1. And then the coordinate over here is the coordinate 1, 2, 3, 4, 3. Okay. Well, if you look at just the x values, 1 to 4, there's a distance of 3 between those. And you can do that just by counting 1, 2, 3 right there. So our a would be 3. You could also do that just by subtracting the 4 minus the 1, right? And then the b is your height. Well, we can find our height by just counting, so 1, 2 units, or you can take that 3, subtract the 1 from it, and you get a distance of 2 as well. So our formula for distance, our distance squared, or c squared, I'm going to call that c our distance instead, so d, is going to equal whatever the x values are, subtracted from each other to find the distance. So we're finding the distance of the x values, so you just subtract them to find distance, plus the distance of the y values, so you just subtract those. And then usually they write it out like this. They just take the square root of all that, because we want just the distance, and a square root cancels out a square. So this would be your formula. So I'm going to go ahead and write that up here. Our distance is always the square root of x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. So we're going to go ahead and do that. You will want a calculator for this. And let's start with number 6. So I'm going to start with the x's. So I'll go ahead and say my distance is equal to, let's say this is x1 and x2, the square root of negative 12 minus negative 5. And we'll square that. Notice I did a double parenthesis because I had to close off the parenthesis in here first, and then also the larger parenthesis for it. So that is our x's right there, or those are our x's. Let's go ahead and do our y's now. So then for our y's, my y2 would be negative 10, my y1 would be negative 7. So negative 10 minus negative 7 squared. And that would be for our y's. I'll just highlight that really quick so we see where those came from. And then at this point, you can do some parts in your head. I would probably just go ahead and use your calculator. But if you wanted to, you could simplify inside the parentheses first. So like do like negative 12 plus 5, which is negative 7 squared. And then do negative 10 plus 7, which is negative 3 squared. But at some point, you would want to type this into your calculator. I am just going to, when I type it in, I am just going to type in the inside. So I'm not going to put the square root in my calculator. So I'll do 7 squared plus 3 squared, and I would get the square root of 58. And then I can go ahead and approximate that by typing it in with the square root. So I'll do square root of 58, and I get approximately 7.62. And there's your distance. I kind of wrote too big, so number 7, let's just do it one more time. So my distance is going to equal, move this to the other side, the square root of, let's do our x's first. So I'll do -1 minus 3 squared plus, and then I'll do my y values. -2 minus 6 squared. And then if I want to do it piece by piece, you could just put the whole, just all of this into your calculator. That's everything that's under the square root. I'm going to go ahead and go piece by piece. I'll do a different color really quick though on that. So I'd get -4 squared plus -8 squared. And then I'm going to go ahead and put that in, but not the square root, so don't put the square root in. And so I'll take my -4 squared, add it to my -8 squared. I get 80. And then I'm going to go ahead and find my distance by typing in the square root of 80. So square root of 80 is approximately 8.94. And that is it.